Bolt fam, week 1 of training camp is in the books, and what a week it's been. We had Mike Williams retiring out of nowhere. We got an update on Najee Harris's eye, and he did report to camp, which is great. Tre Harris signed his rookie deal and reported to camp, plus all the highlights from week 1. So in this episode, we're going to go through all the days of training camp, all the buzzworthy headlines from this week, and talk about what could possibly be in store for next week and who to look for to stand out in training camp in the upcoming weeks. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe to the Electric Edge podcast and follow me on X at Electric Edge Pod. So without further ado, let's get into week 1 of training camp. All right, we got up Chargers.com. So let's go through the buzzworthy headlines from the first week of training camp. Day 1 began with a bang with Mike Williams retiring. This leaves a hole in the offense, but the Chargers have a very young wide receiver room. I think it's just going to be other guys stepping up like KeAndre Lambert-Smith, even possibly Jalen Reagor, who had a good first day at camp. So let's talk about some of the headlines from day 1. The big one that was all over social media on Instagram and X was this 50-yard bomb that Herbert and Reagor connected for. Let's pull up this video here. And that's just day 1. So I'm excited. Jalen Reagor had talent to go in the first round when he was drafted. It didn't pan out. I think he was with the Eagles at one point. I want to say Minnesota, but didn't pan out there. He landed with the Chargers last year. He had that one catch against Arizona, then fumbled in the end zone. So it's like, well, this is why this guy keeps getting cut. But you never know. You're on a new team. You've been in the system now a year. There's great leadership at the top of the organization. You never know what will turn his career around. I'm hoping that this is the first of many deep bomb catches from Herbert to Reagor for this year. But I hope he's just a consistent part of the offense and also on special teams going into the year. Let's see what else for day 1 of training camp. So Herbert said of Reagor, I think he does everything really well. He's one of those guys, whether it's a quick game or intermediate or the deep balls like that, he's definitely fast enough to take the top off. And he's such a great route runner that he's able to beat man coverages. Another guy you feel comfortable going to, whether it's zone or man, he just finds a way to get open. That's great news coming from Herbert. Hopefully he's building that trust and confidence with Reagor that could potentially have a bigger role going into the season on that offense. The article also says Herbert looks sharp in the red zone 7-on-7 drill where he found rookie wide receiver KeAndre Lambert-Smith for a 10-yard touchdown in the back of the end zone. I think with Mike Williams retiring, this is a prime spot for KeAndre Lambert-Smith to step up and be that key piece of the offense. We'll see how training camp progresses, but from what I've seen on X and reading on different news articles from Chargers.com and other sources, he's had a good camp so far in week 1. So I'm hoping that he can build on that and be a really big piece of this offense and filling in those big shoes of Mike Williams. Another part of this article talks about the offensive line. It says one of the biggest position battles in camp will be at left guard and center, where Zion Johnston and Bradley Bozen are expected to eventually settle into those starting spots. But it remains to be seen which position each will play as the two rotated at those spots during the offseason program. Chargers head coach Jim Harbaugh said Thursday that the trend will continue for the foreseeable future. On Thursday, them and Bozen at center and Johnston left guard. That's the plan right now. I don't know how many days, but that will do like that until we lock it in, Harbaugh said. We know we have a trusted agent and known friend in Brad Bozen at center, and we know he could be really good guard and has been a really good guard. And he also talks about Zion as well. It's interesting because they brought back Bozeman, but they also signed Andre James from the Raiders, who's a center. So I think they have several pieces they can move around on the offensive line. Obviously, they want to have depth. They want to prevent or be prepared for injuries just in case. But it'll be interesting to see kind of how that interior, those two spots kind of pan out over training camp and into the preseason. We know we have Joel, Mekhi Becton, and Rashawn Slater locked in on the line. So it'll be interesting to see how those other pieces, those two other spots, kind of pan out as training camp progresses. But, last year, Bozeman got exposed a lot. Trey Pipkins got exposed, so they fixed that piece. And Trey Pipkins is still in the mix, too. He'll probably be a backup this year. It'll be interesting to see how that line plays out through training camp and into the preseason, and what that week one starting offensive line looks like. Okay, and then also in day one, it talks about pass breakups. Derwin James says, first day, it's always good to get your feet wet. James said after practice, feels good to be back out there. With pads not coming on until next week, think of these first few training camp practices as extension of June minicamp. So it says, Jasir Taylor knocked a pass away in a team drill before Daiyan Henley forced an incompletion and nearly hauled in a bobble interception. Eric Rogers also had a pass breakup against Herbert's group before Hart had a good coverage on Quentin Johnston to force an incompletion. So, like I said, big headlines from day one is Reagor's catch, and then having that first look of that offensive line shakeup. Let's go to day two. So as the highlights, it said Henley made a play when he intercepted Herbert. A piece of this says, but what makes Henley's performance even more impressive was the attention to detail he showed earlier in practice. So let's jump into that camp report. Point one, Henley leads the way. Expectations both internally and externally are high for Daiyan Henley heading into the 2025 season. Given the way he played a season ago, it's not hard to fathom him blossoming into a Pro Bowl caliber player with the Bolts. I thought he should have been a Pro Bowl linebacker last year, but it didn't happen. He played outstanding last year. And what really frustrates me is that he didn't even play his rookie year. He comes out of year two and just dominates. It just shows how bad coaching was under Brandon Staley. So the article goes on to say the Chargers linebacker shows why that potential is evident Friday when he recorded the first interception in team drills at camp. Henley perfectly read Justin Herbert's eyes to step in front of a pass intended for Ladd McConkey as the linebacker snagged the pick and raced the other way. The article goes on to say that the Chargers had previously worked on 2-point plays and team drills with Herbert finding McConkey for a score with Henley in coverage. Instead of taking a water break, Henley and fellow linebacker Denzel Perriman spent a few minutes reviewing the play on the video board. It says Henley's interception highlighted a big day for the defense as rookie defensive back R.J. Mickens later had an interception off Taylor Heineke. Minter says, I see a young guy that has great intent about him, about what he wants to do, how he wants to get better. So it's good to hear that rookies are getting into the mix and making some plays out there. It also says Mack and Bud Dupree stood out too, as both got into the backfield for would-be sacks, and safety Kendall Williamson knocked away a Herbert pass on the first throw of practice to help set the tone. Minter said about this, you just like the competitiveness, the energy, guys making plays. It's always up and down during training camp. There's always back and forth days. I don't have an issue with the secondary and even the linebacking core of the Chargers. I think the big key and the big takeaway during training camp and in the preseason is how that defensive line pans out. The Chargers' run defense last year was awful. So it'll be interesting to see how they can stuff on first down and second down when it's a run and kill the momentum of drives. That is what I'm going to be looking out for as training camp progresses, as well as the preseason. The article also goes to talk about the wide receivers. Quentin Johnston had a big play on day two. So the article says the Chargers wide receiver group had a solid day two as the top play came on a 40-plus yard touchdown to Quentin Johnston. That is positive news. Him catching deep balls and one-on-one coverage is what the Chargers need, especially with Mike Williams out of the picture. So hopefully he is still developing and getting better and stopping the drop passes and the issues that have plagued him his past 2 years. The article also goes on to say rookie wide receiver Tre Harris, who signed his rookie contract on Thursday, also had a strong day in his first practice at camp. The 2025 second-round pick was targeted a few times by Herbert in team drills, and the duo connected for a first down on a 3rd and 2 situation late in practice. As I had mentioned, the article does say he will be taking on a bigger role with Mike Williams out of the picture. I thought he was always going to have a big role regardless, just because the lack of talent the wide receiving core has been, especially last year with Herbert. I expect him to be that number 2 wide receiver regardless if Mike Williams is in the picture or not. It also says McConkey had a noticeable day too, as he showcased a strong rapport with Herbert in team drills, including a 3rd and 5 play where the duo moved the sticks for a first down. There was another shuffle on the offensive line. Like I said, they have several moving pieces that I think Harbaugh and Roman want to evaluate to see what combination is going to be their starting 5. So it says Slater and Joe Altman, the tackle spots, but Zion Johnson and Bradley Bozeman flip positions from where they were on day one. That meant Johnston was at center and Bozeman was at left guard in both individual and team drills. Drumry Sailor, meanwhile, filled in at right guard with Mekhi Becton absent. He was at his ceremony for a Super Bowl ring. Congrats to him. Well deserved. It also says Trey Pipkins, who was at left tackle with the second group on Thursday, was at right tackle on day 2. As I had mentioned, I think you're going to see a lot of moving pieces on the line. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, like I said, through training camp, through the preseason, and what that line looks like week 1. I also think it's not out of the question that line evolves as the season goes on as well, depending on how individuals are playing at certain spots. So just keep an eye out for that. Okay, let's go on to day 3. So day 3 was the last training camp of the week. So the one thing that I had seen from just looking over some articles was Oronde Gadsden making plays. I am totally convinced that he is a sleeper pick for the Chargers this year. I think he is going to have a big piece in this offense. He's 6'5", I believe 240 pounds. He's going to be that Travis Kelce / Darren Waller / Brock Bowers tight end for Justin Herbert in this offense. I expect big things out of him this year. The early reports with minicamp was that he was showing up early. He was in at 5 a.m. doing film study. I think this dude's the real deal. I think the Chargers stole him in the draft, and I think he's going to fit so well in this offense. So let's dive into day 3. So Gadsden shows rapport with Herbert. Overall, it's a bit of an up and down day for the Chargers offense, but the one player who did flash was Oronde Gadsden, something the rookie tight end did quite often during the offseason program. Gadsden hauled in 3 receptions Saturday evening, all which came from Justin Herbert, as the quarterback and tight end displayed a blossoming rapport. Herbert found Gadsden on a short route on the second rep of a 7-on-7 drill, but a play later, Herbert whistled the ball down the seam for a 20-plus yard gain that drew cheers from the Bolt fan. Herbert and Gadsden later teamed up for a beautiful connection down the left sideline in a full team drill for yet another chunk play. So let's take a look at this. Another big body target for Justin Herbert. Love to see it. And he's a tight end. Oh my God. I could just see the seams down the field into the end zone. Herbert hits him on a dime. Oh, it's going to be magical. I think if Gadsden lives up to my expectation, I think this is the first real offensive tight end Herbert's going to have. I mean, you can make the argument with Gerald Everett, who was an offensive tight end, but I just think if Gadsden is a steal and he's all the things I think he is, I think he is going to be a fantastic offensive weapon for Herbert in that offense. Okay, here we go. So Henley, again, making plays on day 3. Daiyan Henley and Dean Leonard were part of the reason for not the most clean offensive day for the Chargers. Henley snagged another interception Saturday, making it 2 straight days with takeaway for the third-year linebacker. Henley had some help on Saturday as Denzel Perryman and Dante Jackson converged on Tre Harris and deflected the ball into the air. Henley was then able to corral Trey Lance's pass. Leonard shined earlier in the session on the first play of 11-on-11 session against Herbert's group. Leonard matched Jalen Reagor on a comeback route before stepping from the pass and taking it the other way for a pick 6. Leonard, who has mostly played special teams in his career, did have an interception in the playoffs last season. To see there's other members of the secondary stepping up. They signed Dante Jackson and Benjamin St. Just. They had a couple draft picks in the secondary, plus Cam Hart, Raheem Steele, plus Dean Leonard could be in the mix. So it's good that they have a very young secondary group, plus some veterans in there. So, like I said, I don't think the secondary is the issue for the Chargers on the defense. I think it's that defensive line and how that looks this year, stopping the run and getting pressure on the quarterback. All right, point 3, wide receivers work on fundamentals. This just talks about the Chargers working on some drills, the wide receiver group working on some drills at training camp. Looks like they did a curtain drill, but not too much there. It's good to see that there's some positive notes from Tre Harris, Oronde Gadsden, Quentin Johnston, Ladd McConkey, Jalen Reagor. It'll be interesting to see what happens this week coming up at training camp. I will be there in San Diego for Wednesday's training camp. So I will be having a ton of footage. I will be putting out tweets about what's going on. I can't wait to put together that video for you to kind of see what training camp looks like from the inside. All right, let's look at the 5 takeaways from the first week of training camp to see if there's anything we missed. Okay, number 1, all eyes on wide receivers. 1,000,000%. That wide receiver core has to be elevated from last year, and I think it is. Like I said, this talks about roles elevating with Mike Williams retiring. So Jalen Reagor, like I mentioned, Tre Harris, and KeAndre Lambert-Smith. I think Lambert-Smith is going to have a bigger role than first anticipated, especially with Mike Williams gone. I don't think Tre Harris's role was going to change. I always thought he was going to be the number 2 wide receiver. But we'll see how that depth chart pans out once preseason is over. Cornerback depth is strong. As I mentioned, I don't think the secondary is an issue. They're young. They have some veterans in the mix. I think the secondary is a solid piece of that defense. 3, the O-line's in flux. We kind of knew that. You have 3 pieces locked down. The other 2 are going to be a mix-up. And like I said, I think that's a revolving door throughout the preseason and probably into the regular season, depending on how individuals play. 4, Hampton working as running back 1. If you took a running back in the first round, he's most likely going to be your first string running back. Najee's there. He's not practicing yet, but I always see Najee as the hard yardage running back where it's 3rd and 2, 3rd and 4. They need to get some hard yards. Hampton's going to be that dynamic back out of the backfield, pulling off big runs, catching balls out of the backfield. I don't think there's any question that Hampton is their starting running back going into the year. Okay, and point 5, pads are the next step. So pads will go on Tuesday in training camp in San Diego. So I will have some footage of training camp on Wednesday with pads on, and let's see how the team looks. So all in all, a great first week of Chargers training camp. I think they're building momentum. I think there's a lot of positives to take away from this. And let's see how they build upon it for week 2. And then in the following week, they have the Hall of Fame game. There'll be a lot of good takeaways from that Hall of Fame game. I'm excited to see how some of these unproven rookies pan out, some of these people who are on the fence about being on the roster being cut. So a lot of good stuff in the Chargers' future. I should be putting out more content this week. Like I said, I'll be at training camp Wednesday. If you're going to be in San Diego at training camp, let me know in the comments. We'll love to meet anyone who watches my podcast. As always, be sure to like and subscribe to the Electric Edge podcast. Follow me on X. Leave me a comment below. Let me know about what you think about the first week of training camp, the pros, the cons, the goods, the bads, what you're looking forward to going into week 2 in camp. So thanks for tuning in. And as always, bolt up.